everyone, Laura here. We are back working through food introduction for our infants. We've already done bone broth and beef and chicken that we started out with, and then we worked our way into doing soft-boiled egg yolk, and then we did avocado. Sometimes people like to jump right to avocado first, and that's fine as well, but you can check out videos on all of those that we started with. And today we're going to be introducing some vegetables and starting with broccoli. So really you could start with broccoli, you could do any of the brassica vegetables I'm a big fan of, so cabbage is another great one, cauliflower, those are all things that can be prepared very soft and given to babies. So remember, we're kind of coming from a perspective of whole and processed foods, getting the most nutrient dense foods, meaning that they have the most nutritional value, and then anything that's going to prevent picky eating. So we're kind of doing a process for all those things. So before we jump into the actual food, let's have a little word about baby food and kind of what we think of as baby food, you know, in a jar that you sell or that is sold at the store and that you give to babies. So this idea of baby food, these purees, is a little bit perpetuated by the food industry. It's like when you're pregnant, you have all these decisions to make. It's like natural or medicated birth, breastfeeding or formula. Where are you gonna go to a pediatrician? Are you gonna make your baby food or are you gonna buy it? And it's like, well, if you're not making it, if you're not making purees, then you need to buy them. And it's this big stress, honestly, because when you have a newborn and a young infant, you're kind of like, the idea of buying all these fruits and veggies and figuring out purees and spending a whole day making them and freezing them is a little bit overwhelming. So really, we want to understand that when we're feeding an infant, we're just trying to make their food an extension of the family's food, what we're already consuming. Ideally, whole unprocessed foods, eating fruits and vegetables, eating meats, you know, good quality stuff. And we can just make our dinners and modify it slightly and give it to baby. And that way you're not having to make all these separate foods. So we really want to avoid making separate kid foods. That's going to play into picky eating and kind of teach kids that they have their own foods and adults have their own foods. But there's really no reason for that. And that's going to really bring the family together in terms of their food choice. So everything I've introduced so far has really been very little prep. The bone broth is probably the most time intensive. Wow, it took 5 minutes to put it in the crock pot. And then all you do is freeze it and it lasts for a long time. But things like avocados are super easy to twist open, just as easy as baby food, much more nutrient dense. So we really want to focus on trying to get away from already prepared stuff and just understanding that you don't have to spend all this time in the kitchen to give your baby nutrient dense whole foods. So there was a report that came out recently, and this isn't the first one of its kind, but kind of showing that baby foods can be contaminated, especially the rice-based ones with things like arsenic, and even the jarred baby foods contaminated with some heavy metals, which can interfere with brain development in children. Now, is it enough to, you feed it to your kid and they start having cognitive issues? Absolutely not. That would be an immediate issue that they would pull it from the shelves. But small levels, multiple times a day, over multiple months, in such a young child, for me, I'm just like, less is more, right? The better we can do, that's what I'm gonna go for. So if you can try to just understand that you don't have to make that decision, you can just feed your kid foods that you're already cooking. It makes it so much easier to do. So what I'm doing today is broccoli, and basically this is how I do it. So last night I made broccoli for dinner. I steamed it, and basically after about 10 minutes in the steamer, it just came out looking really soft like this. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull off the stem, which is a little bit more fibrous, and then I have the nice floret portion, okay? And then what I did was I took some of the bone broth that I already had made, and I just simmered it for her a little bit extra, and I did that today. So I simmered it a little bit extra in the bone broth so it was really, really soft. And then what I get is this nice kind of mush, okay? And I just took a fork and mashed it. That's like Lazy Man's purees. And then I just have like these little tiny broccoli pieces. But then she's also getting the benefit of the broth, which she's already used to that flavor. So I've been mixing a lot of things with broth, actually. And then you can do this with cabbage too. Actually, when I made the pork roast, it had a bone in it, so it made like a nice bone broth. And then I had some cabbage in it, and they were just little mushy soft pieces, and I just gave her a tiny bit of that as well. So that's a really easy way to do it. It was already a meal that I was making, and I was just going ahead and giving it to her, but it was soft and easy for her to have. But today's the day she's getting her first just straight up vegetables. It's not kind of mixed in with something else. So we're gonna go ahead, if she'll let me take this away from her and give this to her. Go. You want some broccoli too? Here you go.
I want all that.
You want all the broccoli. Alright, you like that? So this is a little bit less of a liquidy than she's used to, a little bit more texture than she's been used to. But again, we're just kind of introducing this food on its own so that she can start getting used to it. Not too much of a concern with vegetables and fruits with allergens. So, you know, really, I'm not expecting any kind of reaction, but you never know. You still want to be looking for any type of skin reactions when you do introduce a new food. But as I'm going to start with this broccoli, and then again, I'm going to just move through some of the different brassica vegetables, introducing some more cabbage. Now, you don't want to give them like roasted cabbage or something that could is really hard or could get stuck in their throat. You know, this is still chopped up pretty fine. I can put some on her tray and let her also just kind of learn to feed herself. So remember, nothing has to be in that pureed form per se. It can be in kind of a natural food form, and that's kind of what we're going for. You like that?
She loves it.
She loves it. You guys love broccoli, huh?
Yep.
So again, this is organic vegetables, and I do recommend, if you can, trying to get organic, especially just for baby. And if you do have extra, you know, they're not going to eat a ton. If you do have extra of this, you can start keeping in the refrigerator for the next day so that you don't have to prepare it, or you can end up freezing it, so you can kind of do things in real time versus having to have a whole day of cooking and preparing stuff. And that's basically the way I do it. You know, whatever I'm making for dinner, I just pull a little bit out and I kind of preserve it for the next day or for that night for baby, and it just makes it a lot easier. So we're going to keep introducing this to her, kind of let her exploring it. Something else you can do if you're introducing this food, you can also give them, you know, some avocado or something else you've already introduced if you want to pad this meal with something else. But I think the vegetables are going to be a success, so we're just going to keep moving forward with that. And I hope my perspective on baby food has been helpful for you. I know it was a lot easier for me with my first child, learning to just prepare things as I went rather than making it a big deal. So we will check out our next food in our next video, so keep following us and see how babies come along. Thanks, guys. One more thing I want to mention, as you're feeding baby and introducing new foods, part of the supporting healthy foods and getting them to not be picky is to make sure, again, that you're very positive about the foods you're introducing. It's very easy to respond to the baby, like if they make a weird face or something, like, oh, and then you kind of say, oh, they don't like that, you know, oh, they don't like broccoli, or they don't like egg, or they don't like whatever vegetable we're introducing, or they don't like that fruit. Not a big fan of that. And it's like, haha, that's funny. But we start playing into those truths, and then we stop giving that food to the baby as much. So remember, we're building on the foods that we're introducing, and no matter how they respond to it, how many times they negatively respond to a healthy food, you want to keep it positive and just kind of say, okay, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. So again, children are intuitive eaters, meaning that some days if their body needs something that's in broccoli, they're going to crave and eat a lot of broccoli. And then other days they might not. And that's okay. We have to keep offering them a wide variety of nutrient-dense foods, and don't assume or think that they don't like it. They might just have to get used to it. It might not be their absolute favorite, but it might just be that day that they don't want it. So just because they don't like something, don't stop offering it to them, and don't respond to the way that they respond to the food, again, in a negative way, or labeling them as not liking a food. Because once you start labeling them as not liking something, then again, they're going to start believing that, even at, you know, okay, they're 6 months old, it's such a young age, but really those truths will hold true as they get older until you've narrowed them down to so few foods that they don't eat a wide variety of foods. So keep working at it, keep getting them introduced to and liking new foods, and you will thank yourself later. Trust me, as a toddler mom, you will be so happy that your kid is not picky. Thing that I did, this is just steamed broccoli and steamed cabbage that I was already steaming for dinner, so I just pulled a little bit out and then I mixed it in with some of the chicken broth that I already had prepared in the little frozen cubes. And this was super easy to just kind of rough chop it up. You can either do it by hand or throw it in a little mini chopper. But again, it's kind of the lazy man's purees, and you can just kind of prepare this as you go, and then you might have a little bit left over that you could use for the next day too if you wanted. But remember, if you want to do purees, that's totally fine if you want to make them and freeze them, but you can just do it this way too, and it's just a little bit easier. So here we are unconventionally eating outside, but you know, this is kind of a good way to get some of the vegetables in.